Hello and welcome to this little tutorial where I will show you how to create a texture like this inside of Blender with Octane. And I made a video a while back where I showed the exact same um, well, texture creation inside of Cinema4d and Octane. And because I moved on to Blender now, I think it's time to basically take this video I made a while back and apply it onto Blender with Octane. So let's get into it. So let's get started. As you can see right here, I have the UV sphere added to my scene. And if you look here on the upper right hand corner, then you can see that there is only a camera, a single light, and this UV sphere that you can see here on the left in my scene. And I have set up an HDRI with a single color background. If you are interested in how to recreate this inside of Blender with Octane, there's a video on my channel about that. But it's basically pretty simple, just an HDRI with an environment texture, and yeah, that's all. So nothing complicated. And now we want to start to recreate this interesting material. In order to apply a material to our UV sphere, we have to select our UV sphere either here or in the viewport over here. And then you should see this new button up here, um, which we can click in order to create a new material for this object, and it automatically applies a universal material to the surface of our object. So that's totally fine, but what do we do now in order to get this interesting pattern? So what you want to do is press Shift A and type into the search marble texture. Over here we have the marble texture, so we take it and now we can plug it into the albedo of our universal material. As you can see, we already can see the effect of this marble texture happening over here, but of course it looks pretty lame because there's only black and white in our image right now. So in order to get more control over the color and um, the basically the texture itself, we can add a gradient texture to our material, and in order to do this we press Shift A again, and then we search for a gradient texture right here. And now we can take this and put it in between the marble texture and our universal material, and now our pipeline goes from the marble texture into the gradient texture and then out to the albedo of our universal material. So in order to basically make it a little bit more visible what we do inside the gradient texture, you can pull it out a bit. So in here we now have two values. We have this black value basically, and we have this white value, and if we push them together or pull them out, you can see that the effect is visible on inside of our viewport. So this is where we will control how narrow certain color patterns are, how which colors these patterns have. So everything of that is happening over here. So I will turn this white color down so that it is almost black in order to get some variety. And with this little plus over here, we can add another color to our gradient. This one I will make bright green, just because in my last tutorial where I talked about this, I used a similar color, and yeah, for continuity basically. So if we push these together now, you can see that the effect is now pretty visible, and we basically have a black, and in between the light gray or the dark gray, we now have this pretty bright green. And this basically is the whole effect And now we will add onto this effect a little cool detail that just makes the whole thing pop a little bit more, because it looks pretty bland right now. And in order to do this, we will press Shift A again and search for a marble texture again. We can leave it just as it is and just plug it into our roughness. And we take it down a bit and plug it into our bump as well. So now we have connected it to the bump, and we have connected it to the roughness too. And as you can see, now the texture looks pretty, yeah, I don't know, rough. It has much more depth, and it just looks pretty great in my opinion. Of course, you can tweak all of these values as you like and as you need. For example, the power of the marble texture can create pretty cool effects too, but I will leave everything as it is for now, because it's much simpler for the tutorial. You of course can add much more colors to your gradient texture in order to get more interesting patterns. And if we take light blue, for example, and of course we want to crank up our brightness in order to make these colors pop a little bit more, and like that you can create really cool materials. So that's basically it. It's not really complicated. In case you want to change the scale of your marble material or your marble texture, either the one that you use for the roughness and the bump, or the one that you use for the color, you can go down here and you can click on this little plus, and it will add a transform value node. And down here in the scale, you can basically play with the scale a bit in order to get interesting patterns that are much smaller or much bigger than just using the default settings in the marble texture. I really like to put it a little bit or to scale it up a little bit in order to basically don't have such a mathy texture that just is all over the place. It looks much more calm if the texture is a little bit bigger. Of course, we now have a pretty harsh difference between these color palettes, but it's basically the only limit is your own imagination. You can pair pretty cool color palettes in here, and if you want, you can go crazy with how your texture should look. I just want to give a pretty weird example, maybe like this. Let's take the black too. And of course you can create something like that, but that's basically only limited by what you want to create. So that's it for this tutorial. It's pretty simple. I hope you could follow along, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I would really be happy if you leave a like and subscribe, and yeah, take a look at my other tutorials on the channel, and see you next time.